They fired the first director.
Yeah.
They fired the second. Then they had to hire another director.
Yeah.
And they fired him. And they called me and they said, well, Rick, we'd like you to direct the movie. And we've also hired Pelé to be in the movie.
Yeah.
I said, yeah, but it wasn't in the script. He said, well, we have to change that.
Hello, welcome to Movie Town, the Revival Cinema Show. We are on the cusp of World Cup 2026 here in Los Angeles and the rest of the US, Canada, Mexico. And so I thought it was an incredible time to bring Rick King, filmmaker, director of the first American soccer film, HOTSHOT, starring Pelé and Jim Youngs, just to revisit, hear about that film and so many of your other films. Rick, thanks so much for coming on Movie Town.
Well, it's my pleasure.
So
really looking forward to it.
Yeah. So just, to jump right into HOTSHOT, what was the origin of this first soccer movie to come about in the US? Was it something that you had been working on and wanted to make a soccer movie? Was it something that was brought to you?
It was something that was brought to me. It was a real estate guy, Steve Yappas, in New York.
Was he a big New York Cosmos fan and like that world?
He loved the Cosmos, yeah.
The team in HOTSHOT is the New York Rockers, which is like an obvious kind of homage or version of the New York Cosmos that has some like old retiring players, like a lot of foreign players. Mario Van Peebles, plays like a dreaded soccer guy from Korea. Yeah, he's great. When he came to you, did he say, I want to make the New York Cosmos kind of movie? Was it?
No, to him it was, he loved this character.
Yeah.
Jimmy, he would always talk about Jimmy as if he was a real person, and it was, there was a purity to it that was really refreshing, because he wasn't doing it because he thought we can really sell in the Midwest, or this is going to do great because it's got Humphrey Bogart in it. I mean, he just wanted to tell a soccer story.
And how did he get Pelé to be in this movie? Because Pelé wasn't, he was in Victory, which was some years before this. Do you know, how did he even approach to Pelé to get him?
This was one of the great strengths and of Steve. He would have these wild ideas, and he just charge ahead. I mean, And so the film was being shot. I always had done a rewrite on it, and left the project and was called back and told that he had gone out and hired Pelé, but nothing to do with the film whatsoever. Right. But he was so naive on one level that he just kind of, the movie was not like a script. It was like this sort of sculpture, which I guess they are, but like he just said, what do we need? What's going to make this work? Pelé, and he didn't really think about how that was going to work or anything. And I think he sort of said, it was like someone with a beautiful chicken dish, and his tastiness, it needs something else. How about we just sprinkle in some Pelé? And that was really good.
Oh, I mean, it was coming up. Was part of that idea, or was it a timing to try to align with the 1986 World Cup in Mexico?
No, it's just how do I communicate my love? This is Steve Pappas speaking. How do I communicate my love of soccer to the world?
Did you have any background in soccer at the time, or?
I played it when the 1st through 7th grade.
And
I always liked the World Cup. I could see it. I'm half British, so isn't there part of it hit deep in the blood, right? So I was called in, and they sent the script to me, and it was an independent production, pretty big budget, $2 million, and they were 2 or 3 weeks from starting, actually, and they wanted me to to polish the script, and I said, look, there was the guy financing it, and the main producer, and then his production manager and the director. And I said, look, I'm happy to polish the script, But for me, it's like polishing the silver while the house is burning down. It's really a terrible script. He looks at me and kind of goes, well, what, why do you think it's bad? And I said, well, because it's about a nice kid who's very talented. And then he does nice things and he's successful in the end and they win the championship. And I said, that's not in the least bit interesting. He looked at the person next to him, the production manager. He said, well, what do you think? And he goes, yeah, no, I agree with her. And then
3 weeks after
3 weeks from shoot, they had the whole, we were in a production office. It was a completely, art department was, going, everything was in complete and utter, heading right for the start date. He asked all his guys and they all told him that they thought I was right. And he was kind of surprised by this because no one had said that to him before. And he asked me, he said, well, Rick, how would you change it? And I said, well, I'd make the guy really a jerk.
Yeah.
And he starts off and you hate it. I mean, he's just selfish and, his talent is not something that he uses for good. It's something that boosts his ego. And then he has to have a fall.
Yeah.
And he has to be humiliated. And then through that process, he learns to love. He learns to look outside of himself. He learns to see. And when he gains that ability, then he becomes a great soccer player. They hired me, and I checked into a hotel. And I just sat there and rewrote the script from page 1 through page 100. Just churned it out. Every morning there would be a production assistant at my door, and I'd hand them the pages that I had, and they would take them down to the production office, and then they would start changing the locations and adding characters and all the things, the changes that I made. So anyway, they went with that script, which was basically just typed right out and then quickly revised, and that's what they shot with. They called me back. They fired the first director.
Yeah.
They fired the second. Then they had hired another director.
Yeah.
And they fired him. And they called me and they said, "Well, Rick, we'd like you to direct the movie." And we've also hired Pelé to be in the movie.
Yeah.
I said, yeah, but it wasn't in the script. He said, well, we have to change that. I just rewrote the draft, incorporated Pelé, and we went down, and it was great. It was an incredible experience. I mean, Pelé is, he lives in a very interesting scene that, it's a very, very, not necessarily exactly what you'd expect. And he's also a really nice guy.
And yeah, no, I mean, he just jumps off the screen in all those scenes and
he exudes a warmth. I thought it was great. And we just tried to harness that. And some of my favorite scenes in the movie actually are just Pelé and Jim Youngs on the beach.
Oh yeah, no, the beach in Brazil is the stuff I remember the most. I mean, the iconic scene is the Jim Youngs character being taught how to do a bicycle kick.
Right.
And like anyone like me who grew up with this movie in like the late 80s, 90s, if they saw they were playing like youth soccer, I don't know like how many injuries you guys might be responsible for. But like absolutely, you watch that movie and then you go and try to practice like doing a bicycle kick.
And I also remember those really long headers that really high. They would just seem to go to like hundreds of feet up in the air.
Yeah. Well, there was that great scene that made me think, God, was Jim Youngs like a pretty good soccer player when he and Pelé are heading the ball back and forth to each other on the beach?
I think Jim Youngs was just a good natural athlete.
Yeah.
He
was in Young Bloods.
Yeah.
Before that, the hockey movie.
Yeah. And he was, his brother is John Savage.
Okay. Yeah.
And also there was stuff that we had access to, act as Pelé and stuff. And there's some black and white footage of Pelé in the movie.
Yeah.
Which we, I talked to him and said, could we incorporate, and we dug it up and
those moments are really like pretty fun to come in the movie and see or footage of. And was that stuff, was that because the character's name is Santos, and I'm sure that comes from, that was his club team he played for. Was that footage from Santos games, or was it from
I think it was the World Cup.
Yeah.
Because he does the bicycle kick.
Yeah.
And, slow down and yeah. So all that stuff had been injected into the film. And I think it really raised the level a lot. And so anyway, we finished all that. And then we came back, and I was responsible for all this footage, from 3 people. And we just, cut away at it. And then we filled in what was missing back in the United States. We said, well, this all works except we don't have this. There's no bridge between this and we filled in a lot of soccer, close-up stuff.
Okay.
So a lot of the ball went in the net. The ball didn't go in the net. Ball went down. They had a lot of wide shots,
right?
But there were things like the ball going.
So kind of the larger staged games and crowds were from the earlier
that
shoots.
Was number 2.
Okay. The number 2
director. Yeah. But we also shot Americana with Pelé at Americana. That we shot, of course. We shot everything that was in Brazil, which was an amazing.
Oh, when he goes to the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's the name of the stadium?
Yeah.
Is that the Santos Stadium? Or
no, Americana is the biggest, one of the biggest soccer stadiums in the world. The game we went to watch was between the two big rivals in Rio.
Yeah.
We're the 2 big rivals.
Okay.
And Mango and Fluminense. And they divide the stadium in half, right? And they put up a barbed wire fence and barrier that's like 30 feet tall. And 80 or 90% of the audience watches the game, and 10% throw themselves against these barriers trying to get at their enemy on the other side, which they can't do. Obviously. So I'm surprised that the movie is not. I think it's a lot to do with rights and where the materials are and stuff like that. But to me, it's not a perfect movie by any means. But the involvement of Pelé is, I think, very special, and it would be. I think it should be preserved for that reason.
Yeah.
And secondly, I think it would make money, because I just think Pelé is just, it's like having a movie with Babe Ruth in it.
I mean, I can't believe it's not being screened around LA every time there's a World Cup, and especially one when, it's in town, it's right here in LA. And because I think there's a certain, like, people my age, or like I discovered the movie like going to soccer camps in Arizona, and they would make you take breaks, like in the summer in the heat. They go put you inside some classroom or something and put on HOTSHOT. I must have seen it 10 times just in soccer camps growing up. And then, like, you'd have soccer team parties or something. But kind of after that, it really wasn't in the consciousness as much. And it always surprised me, because Pelé is both so good in it, and just one of the most famous people in the world, or certainly athletes.
And one of the most beloved.
Yeah.
And the movie was a huge success in some unlikely places. It was a huge success in China.
Wow, yeah. Just because of...
Probably because of Pelé. Who knows?
Before the 86 World Cup, when Diego Maradona, that was really his, like, grasping the best, athlete soccer player in the world.
Was that the
yeah. That's hand in a hard. Yeah. I think he had played it in the 82 World Cup. I can't remember. That one was maybe in Spain, but 86, was when they won it.
Right.
But prior to that, Pelé was the most famous athlete, him and Ali, in the world, really.
Yeah. I mean, when he was a teenager.
Yeah.
And some of that footage was incorporated, of course, into HOTSHOT a little bit, little flash.
So
he was
so
young.
Yeah. In China, I bet it really did have, I wouldn't be surprised if it floated through, surprising countries in Africa, or who knows.
Yeah, no, it had a lot of, it did pretty big business overseas. Whether Steve actually saw any money from that, I don't know.
Just being like a soccer player and soccer fan and a film person, it's always bugged me a little bit that there aren't more like great soccer movies. And certainly kind of American ones. I think people have tried it, or they've tended to be a little too, they're kind of geared towards kids.
It's not a movie.
Yeah.
It's not a movie like Slapshot.
Yeah, exactly. There's not.
Slapshot is a great hockey
Right.
movie, just hands down.
Yeah, you don't have to know anything about hockey to like put that on and completely enjoy it, and yeah,
And at the same time, it's pretty sophisticated.
Oh,
like
right.
hockey.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no.
you can get it on a lot of
I
levels.
think that's what I'm like for my taste. I think you hit it exactly. Of there's some kind of feel good or a certain kind of soccer movies. There's not just that thing that is Slapshot, Bull Durham, that's like about the spirit of that sport. And so I'm still hoping that happens at some point. Did you feel, when you were making this, did you feel yourself getting invested in like, okay, soccer could have this moment in America in the late 80s?
I had always thought that soccer could have its moment, and I always wondered why. I'm an unlikely 6'6.5" guy that played high school football. So and seriously, I mean, I was started, and so I thought, well, football just kills soccer. It can't, and I went to a high school where soccer was huge, and football was really a big sport.
Whereabouts?
I went to a boarding school in New Hampshire.
Okay.
And the soccer team's really good.
Yeah.
And, I'm very respected as athletes. But at that point, it was sort of like there was football and then there was soccer.
Yeah.
At my place where I went to high school, where'd you go?
I grew up in Tucson, Arizona. And so soccer was a year-round sport.
Yeah, it got pretty big in the West first, right? And in New England.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's had pockets. The big pockets were Kansas City, St. Louis, and then kind of New York tri-state, but kind of the big old school pockets. And then, the time I was growing up, Texas was really coming alive, in California were kind of the obvious. But yeah, it was a very big deal. Football was still bigger high school sport and all of that, but more people I knew growing up played soccer.
The changes that happened were incredible. I have a guy that cut a couple of films for me, great guy, Israeli high, and he was a very good soccer player. He was in the farm system for the big team in Tel Aviv. I don't know what the name is.
Maccabi Tel?
Yeah, exactly. And he became a film editor, and he left. And he was here in his 20s at some point, and he was playing pickup soccer.
Yeah,
and he was good, right? A guy came up to him and said, we have this professional soccer league. Would you like to come and try out for the Galaxy? The Galaxy aren't recruiting, 27-year-old guys off schoolyards now. I mean, they're hiring, all, World Cup players that are getting a little older than things like that. I mean, it was just, the change has been
back in 86, the U.S. hadn't even played in a modern World Cup. Last time they played was like 1950.
And was that because it was here? Or no, they just slide in some.
I don't know what the qualification was back then, but they had a famous upset of England at that World Cup. And that was the last
World Cup
until they qualified for the 90 World Cup in Italy, which was a huge thing. And then, of course, it was announced right before that 90 World Cup they got the 94 World Cup. And that was kind of the big turning point when the Galaxy and MLS started. And yeah, did you have any connection either with Pelé or with soccer as it started to evolve? Did people come to you with other soccer movies or ideas?
No.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Which is kind of sad. I think.
Yeah.
And as you say it, I think, my God, I should have developed an idea like that, because the great thing about Slapshot is that the sport is primary, but the characters are also primary, so that it's not just about hockey. It's about being a human being in a real Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Just like the one, the basketball movie in Indiana.
Yeah.
Hoosiers.
So Blue Chips. Yeah, there's been more.
There's been some good ones.
Yeah. From HOTSHOT, how then did you get to your next, because then you did kind of do two movies that did have kind of a sports thing, certainly with Prayer of the ROLLERBOYS and Point Break. Was that something that, like, working on a sports movie, you think, like, set off in you, or that was just who you were?
Well, with Point Break, it started because I went to Malibu
Yeah.
and in a absurd light blue wetsuit, which I would never wear now, and with yellow arms. And amazingly enough, everybody was really welcoming and kind.
Yeah.
And and so I surfed a little bit there. I've been surfing a bit around, but actually was getting up and getting across. And I just got back in and I sat down on the beach and I thought, I just looked out at people and I said, that was great. That was, I'm been committed to surfing ever since. But like, that's great. What would happen if people wanted to do that all the time and to do it, they rob a bank?
Yeah.
And I just read an article in the newspaper about LA being a big center for bank.
Yeah, I was considered like the bank robbery capital of the world for a time.
Exactly, because you could rob the bank, jump in your car, get on the freeway, and you're
Right.
gone.
Yeah.
Right? And I said, well, surfers who rob banks.
Did you remember like what, because Point Break, I know you worked on it, Point Break came out in 91, but you developed it and stuff earlier. What period was that? Was that after HOTSHOT that you kind of came up with the initial idea for Point Break?
Was after I'd made a film called Hard Choices.
Yeah.
And that took a while to come out. And that's when I did the HOTSHOT thing. But so that brought me out to LA. And that's when that was. And so I had that idea. I pitched it around to the studios and I got a little bit of traction here and there, and then sold it to some independent producers as a project to develop. What went into an agreement with them.
And were you thinking that you would direct that at that time when you had this?
Yeah, I was attached as the director.
And it was called Johnny Utah at that point, right?
It was called Johnny Utah. It was also called Wipeout.
Okay.
So and Point Break was one of the later iterations.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of like Wipeout.
Yeah. It's not. There might be a movie called Wipeout or something. And then, when eventually James Cameron and Catherine Bigelow came onto it, were you still like a day-to-day producer on it, or was it sold at that point and then
I had a contractual right to a producing for it.
Yeah.
And I had obviously the story credit because I thought in my story, which I shared with Peter Huff. And I wrote I wrote the ending. But once it'd been optioned and taken and was developed earlier by Ridley Scott.
Yeah.
And at that point, there was I'm just not into hanging around. I mean, it's like it was my project. Now it wasn't my project anymore. And, if I couldn't direct it or have a significant part creatively, I'd rather just not be there, and,
what was it like to then see the version that ended up, coming from that? Like,
I was really pleased.
Okay. Yeah.
I thought there were some things that I didn't completely understand. I never understood, for example, why his superior officer, was screaming all the time. It's like and he builds up to that today. He started off screaming at him. Johnny Utah walks in the door and they're screaming. Oh yeah, and it was like
that was like
it's
almost the stereotypical from like Beverly Hills Cop and stuff. It was the police chief or the sergeant at the time. Yeah.
But a comedy. I mean, exactly. But generally, I really liked the film, and I think the thing that it wasn't just the plot about surfing and the bank robberies and stuff. A lot of the strength, I thought, and what was important to me about the project was it had a certain attitude.
Yeah.
And it really does. It sort of questions everything. The idea of a guy goes undercover into the gang and he likes the gang better. I mean, that's not exactly the most original thing in the world, but there's only 5 plots in the whole of literature anyway, right? But like, it's how you deal with it. And I thought that I thought the attitude was great. There was a little bit of preachiness and kind of spirituality, which I felt uncomfortable with, but the idea was originally that, you can't get a little bit involved with evil. once you do get involved, then it takes over. And,
It just made me think of that like Ozploitation movie from the 70s or 80s, one of the first ones, Stone, about that undercover cop goes in a biker gang. It was like a really seminal Australian movie.
oh yeah, I haven't seen. I've heard of it. It's supposed to be really good.
It just made me think, oh yeah, there have been other, kind of like the cop goes
Or Johnny
undercover.
Knoxville.
But you brought up the ending of Point Break, and I like love the ending of Point Break. I still think it's like so iconic, and I can remember where I saw Point Break was with my cousins going to like a dollar theater at the time when they had dollar theaters. Like after the movies had been in their initial runs, they would go into these theaters. You go see them for $1. That's where I really grew up, was seeing movies at the dollar theater. And I was visiting family in Texas in San Antonio. We went and we saw Point Break at a dollar theater and like knew nothing about it. And it like bowled everyone over. Like, my parents, the cousins, like grandparents, like everyone loved the movie. And still to this day, I say vaya con Dios, amigo, to like my cousins. And I did want to bring up though, because in preparing to talk, I watched The Killing Time, your movie before, and the last line of that movie is vaya con Dios, amigo. Did you write it from that, or did you take it from that movie?
No, I say it just, it was like, it was a phrase that was just around, and and there you go. It just went in there and it never came out. It's so weird.
Yeah.
Absolutely right.
Yeah, that's so funny. Did you realize that at the time that those movies had like the same last line?
I was not really on the set, so I can I figured that the lines had been I mean, I had the idea for the ending, and then I'd written it, and then Peter had rewritten it, or whatever.
Yeah.
Hey, we done it together and conceived it, and he actually wrote it. So, and you're making a connection which I've never made. So there you go. It's really
The Killing Time,
and I'm really a self-involved guy, and I never thought of myself.
Yeah, that's why. Well, The Killing Time. I mean, it was a really fun, like 80s neo-noir was kind of like a big thing at that time. And this is like a coastal California. What incredible cast in that movie. Beau Bridges, Keifer Sutherland is just unbelievable, like jumps off the screen. Michael Madsen had this really small role where he doesn't come back into the movie. But and then God, what was that character actor's name? Joe Don Baker, who had the line. He says it to Beau Bridges at the end of that movie, Vaya con Dios.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah, really fun.
He was a good actor.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a good movie actor.
Yeah.
Joe Don Baker. He had a big presence. He didn't really make that many movies.
God, I'm picture. Was he in Smoking the Bandit, or
it was Walking Tall or something? Something. He had a series couple, and he was the bad guy in one of the Bond movies.
Okay.
Can't remember which one.
Yeah, I feel like I instantly knew his face when he came on. That was fun. And then, so how did that project come to you? Because that was your third feature, your follow up to Hard Choices was The Killing Time, right?
Well, it was Prayer of Roll. Oh yeah, Killing Time came to me because two independent producers came to me, and they came to my agent, and they said, "We're looking for a director. We'd like to talk to Rick." And so they talked to me, and they just hired me to do it. And again, and I think they agreed. I said, I think it needs a rerun. And they had brought in a guy who was very good and who rewrote it. Yeah. So it was a ready-made project, ready to go. Yeah. And I thought, oh, this is how it is in Hollywood. Just walk from project to project. This is great. I love it.
That was the last time. How did you come to filmmaking? And at what point in your life?
I really got heavily into films when, I was about 13 or 14. The high school I went to, there was a couple of guys who were really, really into it, and I was into it. And there was a real repertory movie theater circuit in Washington, D.C., where I grew up, and the Circle Theater and all these theaters. And I just started going to the movies, and I loved them. I just loved them, and I loved the Hollywood movies too. And I suddenly, I would go to 2 or 3 movies a week at least,
Yeah.
and when I could. And
And
also it's a thing with my father was British and really uptight, but he loved movies, and so we would go. That was something we did together. Also, he loved Bergman.
Oh, wow.
So I'd be there at 13 years old watching Smiles of a Summer Night on Seven, and they were great. I got to admit.
Like, yeah, Bergman came to me much later than 13. Like, I wonder how those movies would have hit me then. But and
Where you see Max von Sydow play
Yeah.
chess with death,
yeah,
you no matter how old you are,
Yeah.
so this is pretty cool.
yeah. And then were you making movies in college, or I know you did film school or grad school at MIT?
No, I was an undergraduate.
Yeah.
I was here on the West Coast. I was at Stanford, and I was a history major. And to make movies, you had to wait until you were a junior or senior, and then you got to make I don't know, movie on Super or something. I don't know what it was, but and I had a friend who worked for Ricky Leacock, who's a famous documentary filmmaker, and he was one of the first guys to actually pick the camera up and just carry, to use
like real direct cinema documentary.
cinema verite.
Yeah.
And he was teaching at MIT.
Okay.
And a friend of mine had been an intern in his company in New York. And so I said, hey, would you give me an introduction? So I called him, and I said, I want to learn about movies. And he said, well, come on back. So I transferred back. He was teaching at MIT, so I transferred to MIT. And they had nothing but equipment, the best equipment you can imagine. Flatbed editing tables, which were like, the state of the art at that point.
It's so interesting because I had never heard about MIT having like a film program.
Not many people had, well, luckily. And so,
But when I looked up, Ross McElwee was kind of one of the students. Did you cross paths with him?
No,
Or that was a different
no.
time.
yeah, was that the guy that did Sherman's Morning?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was there. And,
Rod Moss.
right, they were after me.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So I paid the way for it. No,
Yeah.
anyway, no. Anyway, so Ricky was a great guy, and they just handed out the equipment and the film, and so I was there for a year, and then I stayed for about another half a year, 3/4 of a year, as a sort of unofficial grad student. I was the person that kept the place open at night, and I gave out the equipment, and they then let me keep working with the equipment and funded me a little bit and stuff like that. So
And did you think you would go into documentary filmmaking after that?
I know I always wanted to do features.
Yeah.
But I also just wanted to make movies
Right.
and films. So I was certain that I would at least try to do features. But
And how soon after MIT did you do Off the Wall or start shooting Off the Wall?
I went back. I graduated from Stanford.
Okay.
Got my degree. I went and worked in an auto factory and saved up some money worked for 6 months, and then we started Off the Wall.
Off the Wall, was your first feature. And did you shoot that over a couple years? Like, what was it
We shot it over a year and a half.
Yeah.
It was made for a very low budget, and it just got a lot of attention. It played in film festivals in Europe and Edinburgh and stuff like that, and played in 30 or 40 theaters around the country. And even though it was in 16 millimeter, it got quite a bit of attention.
Yeah.
And after that, I was a person that wanted to be a film director. And once you've made your feature, even if it's, cost $11,000, you are a feature film director.
Right.
I mean,
But but I guess it was 8 years, sort of, because that came out in 77, and then Hard Choices was 85, or was it?
Yeah, 85.
Yeah.
So it's 8 years,
Yeah.
7 or 8 years.
And
And
kind
by
of
the way, I
actually-
just want to mention
yeah.
that Off the Wall is
yes.
being put on 4K by Muscle Distribution.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
My friends Lee Burrito and Alex Guter,
Yeah.
and they're hoping to put it into the whole repertory circuit, and I'm really excited about it.
When do you think that like the last time that was shown in a theater?
The last time it was shown in a theater was probably a long time ago. It's shown. I mean, it kind of passed around on DVD.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people have seen it on DVD. For example, my sons, all his friends have seen it because it's required. They have to see it. But and
then it seeps out into the world from there.
there, right?
Like when you were making movies in the, your features in the 80s and 90s, would that movie come up as something like that was known, or was it kind of, it had its moment and then
It had, well, it did come up. Yeah. I mean, it's strangely enough. I mean, and there were people that were associated with it, and I was friends of mine that had worked on it. With then, for example, the first cameraman was shot in two parts. The first part was shot by a guy named John Alts, who became a very famous documentary filmmaker, and he did a groundbreaking documentary about Oppenheimer and didn't know about water rights in California. Taught at UC Berkeley. So there were, all these people in the industry, and I was using it as a quality knob tip. Yeah, it's like, look, this is what I can do, and so it got me a lot of writing jobs and stuff like that, because I spent I was my mother calls it the yogurt years. So it's like, it's like yogurt.
Did you have spec scripts that you were taking out that you had hoped to make too, or?
Oh yeah, I was writing spec scripts. I was writing scripts that people needed written. They had an idea. They had a project, but they needed a writer and that kind of thing.
Is that how Hard Choices came about? Did somebody come to you with, because it has a story by credit from someone else? Did that?
That's from the producer.
And
so I had we set out. No, we were friends. We were actually partners in New York for like 3 or 4 years, business partners. Yeah, we split everything we had, and we did commercial stuff to make money, and then we were working towards this idea of making a feature, and then we found this idea, and combined two stories that, two real stories.
Yeah.
And we just decided to do it. We I sat down and wrote the script, and we started raising money. We had half the money. We made it for like 400 grand, 500 grand. And we went to a guy in New York, and he was a sort of rich guy. And we said, we would like you to finance this movie. As you said, oh, okay. We'd like you to finance it sometime within the next 2 or 3 weeks, because the colors are changing in the leaves up in the Catskills, and we have to shoot before winter. Yeah. So, and he did.
That's so interesting, because that movie, like, I think is one of those that has a real reputation, but kind of, it's never, I don't think it's ever gotten a DVD or Blu-ray release, right? Did it just come to VHS?
Hard Choices.
Yeah.
Had a theatrical release,
right?
And
but I mean, I guess,
and it was played in New York for 3 months,
right? And it was on Roger Ebert's top 10 of the year.
On his top 10 for the year, yeah, and a bunch of top 10 lists, and then it went out to it had a huge sales on VHS, and it sort of missed the DVD era. Right. It does. No one has the rights now. I actually am. I'm going. That's one of my next things is to try and figure out a way of getting that out, because
the VHS box is like really familiar to me, of just one that I used to see going through the store and stuff.
Yeah,
so I think of it as that, and
I don't think of. I mean, I think if you're Steven Spielberg, you don't go into the VHS store to sort of reassure yourself. I mean, there's a whole shelf that's Steve Spielberg. Yeah. I used to go in just to make sure that there was still the 2 VHS copies there of Hard Choices. Yeah. I mean, Killing Time's fine, but Hard Choices is the movie I want people. I know Off the Wall's not going to end up there. And so I go, oh, it's been checked out. Now I'll go and see next week. Oh, it's back. Yeah. Okay. So they're going to lose it,
Yeah, that's incredible. And then, jumping back into that time, kind of after you had let Point Break go, and then you pivoted with Peter Iliff to Prayer of the Rollerboys. Was that kind of a natural pivot of like, we still want to do something at the beach, kind of, but it's a very different kind of movie?
I'd read, we had the same agent.
Okay.
And I'd read Prayer of the Rollerboys. And
so it was a script.
I love the energy. And
so as Peter had written that,
he'd already written it.
Okay.
And then so I got uh, bumped. I got bumped out. I mean, I wasn't kicking and screaming, but like of Point Break.
Yeah.
And but we had been talking about Prayer of the Roller Boys, and I said, well, let's make Prayer of the Roller Boys, and
Yeah.
so we did, and we just set up. The one change that we did was that we it was set in the present,
Yeah.
and so I talked with Peter about it. We made all our decisions as a group, the producer, the writer, and the director. And I said, I'd like to move to the future.
Yeah.
I think that would be hip, and I think that was really, there's a lot of the humor in Prayer.
Yeah. I think that's why, I mean, why it's still kind of, you know, like I saw it last year at Brain Dead Studios, and
It was a cool screening.
oh, that was a really fun screening. And why I still think it resonates a bit is that, you know, what that vision of the future was in 1990, I think it came out,
Right.
and did you connect any dots between like came on and made a soccer movie, this like sort of not in the spotlight sport, and then rollerblading is kind of this new sport, and then surfing, they were kind of like sports just on the outside of the thing. Like, did you notice that at the time?
No, I never noticed it.
Yeah.
But I do like sports. I'm not necessarily a great sportsman, but I like, I surf, I play beach volleyball. I mean, it's like I'm really a guy that likes sports, and it's more that uh, it's and diving, and they that are focused on the beach. But again, you're making connections I never thought of. I kind of just have ideas, and for example, I had always wanted to make a movie about the World War II, and I've been really interested in it. And then people came to me with the Force project for Force March.
I just watched Force March last night, and like, so I really want to talk about it. But so that was 89. Is that when that came out? Or was it later?
It was later.
It was later. I had it written down, but because I thought that was such an interesting movie. Oh, it was. I think I have it down as 89.
Oh, yeah, that's right. 89. Yeah, I'm good.
So I shot it for
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah, incredible.
And with the Evan Lodman, the editor, was the guy that cuts Coolest movies, and it was a really. So I think it's a really
at the time.
Realize that, and her choices are maybe the.
Well, it's interesting. Even I was thinking about it when you were talking about HOTSHOT. I started thinking about the Chris Sarandon character in Forced March. Who's this TV actor who's trying to, his show has ended after 7 seasons. He's famous. Then wants a career kind of as more prestigious films. He takes on this World War II role as the Jewish Hungarian poet who in the movie itself is kind of this meta. There's a movie within the movie, you're watching the actual kind of World War II story of the real poet. He's a real person, right? Miklos Raunodi, and but it's a really interesting movie because he starts out and you definitely don't like this guy, but over the course of that movie, like, I mean, there's this big change, and it really, like, it leaves you in a really interesting place. Was the script as it was when you
Script was they came to me with a script.
Yeah.
The writer was a guy named Dick Atkins.
Okay.
Who also was the main producer.
Okay.
And I did some rewriting on it, but it was his script.
Yeah.
And another guy he teaches at NYU named Carolee Bardosh. But it was Dick's father had been one of the first troops to open up the concentration camps.
Yes.
And it had been and then he'd heard about this story, and I think I think the general approach in the script is brilliant because it takes you right to the edge of the horror.
Yeah.
And then it's a movie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it kind of bounces back and forth. And
did they set out initially to make kind of a biopic of?
No, the whole idea of going back.
There's
and
always
forth,
that,
because part of it was that was relatively new or not so much explored at that point, which was the whole criticism of Jews for, submitting supposedly, and looking at that, looking at how complicated the decision was and how complicated the situation was. And a couple of the scenes that I added were scenes between Sarandon and the soldiers and that he became friends with, but and they're one of them is saying, "How come you didn't know?" And and it's a lot about collaboration, and how that could happen. The cast was really, I mean, Chris Sarandon, I thought was fantastic.
Yeah.
And I loved Renee Sutentag as his wife too, and I thought the side characters were really good. At that point, Hungary was just about to fall. The Iron Curtain was going to fall.
Budapest.
So we shot Budapest, right? But they were still under, supposedly communist regime, and actors had to act in the theater. So almost all the actors are
Hungarians, like
directors.
directors.
Our directors are always at work.
Oh.
I said, we can't get the real actors. Let's get directors. They know how to act, and they were all terrific. And then the guy who was the commandant of the camp, was the production designer.
Okay.
And who came from a very interesting background in Hungary. His father had been in the resistance, and had been the only one that of the communist infrastructure that had stayed in Hungary. So he's much beloved. And when the kind of party apparatus came back from Moscow after the war, he was made the Minister of the Interior, which was a tough job because all the people who had lost their loved ones, all the Jewish men joined the Interior Ministry because they wanted to hunt down the people that, so he was trying to control it. Anyway, as is typically, he was very popular. He was accused of treason. He underwent a show trial and was sentenced to death and executed. And Laszlo, who's the guy who plays the commandant, and is a great production designer, his mother said, "Well, you have to have a public funeral." So he was like 5 or 6, holding his mother's hand, and they're walking down the street in Budapest. 100,000 people beyond for this, and that was precursor to the 56 revolution.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's such an interesting time because there hadn't been a lot of American Holocaust movies, or at least that took on burden or responsibility of like fictionalizing the Holocaust as like entertainment. But the movie really almost foresaw like the questions that, kind of kept, after Schindler's List in 92, I think, and there were so many Holocaust films, and it Forced March really makes you think about what it is to like both make those from a filmmaking side and to be watching them. And so it really, like, Forced March is one of those films that's a little bit of a slow burn to like get under your skin. It really started to get under my skin by the end. And, that final shot of him in the pool overlooking LA is just fantastic. And I wonder, was that like always in your mind as the final kind of image for the film?
It was in the script.
Yeah.
And I was always torn because I love the scene that comes before that, his death, and to me it could have ended there.
Yeah, it could have ended with his
Yeah.
that was like
that. So so I was really torn, but I thought it worked. I thought it worked really. I really going back and seeing the movie later, it really and seeing the reaction of my friends is that when they see it, is really gratifying because it really is. I pleasantly surprised. I think it's very powerful and really works on a variety of levels. And Radnoti, as you say, the guy is shallow. The actual Radnoti is quite a admirable guy.
Yeah.
And an incredible poet.
Yeah.
But it's also an interesting thing about poetry because his poetry, as he is reduced to really writing poems of 3 or 4 lines, because he's how, he's being in forced labor camps and stuff. His poetry gets better.
Yeah.
And his poetry is just it just puts another.
He only has the energy for so many words. You better stick on.
Yeah. Or else you're just being hurried away or whatever.
And I think the filmmaking of that is so interesting, of the transitions between real life, the present, and then the blending of like the movie scenes, the kind of seamlessness of those. I really liked those moments. Was that in the script level or
a lot of that was in the script?
Yeah. There's that one great 360 one.
Yeah.
That starts in the present. They're at a table in a cafe, and then you pan out and it's Budapest present. And then when we come back and land on the table, now Chris Sarandon is Miklos in the 40s, and
yeah, it could in the process of the 360.
Was that in
camera? It was all in camera. Yeah. It starts off and then gradually merges. So by the time you're 3/4 of the way around, you're all completely in the past. Yeah. And it's being a kid that was, and my generation was very much like this, obsessed with the World War II, to actually be having, troops and tanks and to do all this. And we really had a lot of stuff available to us.
Yeah, no, because you had to, essentially also make half of a World War II movie. It's so interesting of like trying to, take on both of those. And who was did you base the director of the film within the film? Did you base him on any like real directors?
No, he was a guy that was in Hard Choice. He played the sheriff.
Okay. Yeah.
And but it was interesting because we were like shooting in Budapest and in one of the older sections of town, and we were shooting the morning. We were going to shoot the invasion of Budapest, and then in the afternoon we were going to shoot some dialogue scenes in the house. So early in the morning we had lined up, a tank and some stuff and a lot of troops, and they approach, Red Nochi's out and they're approaching, and then it's a typical movie trick. I mean, he then goes through an alley and comes out on another street, and that's also filled with troops and tanks and stuff, which are of course the same ones that were in the other street. But so anyway, so he comes. So it really looked like there was just German troops all over the place, and the guy was the location manager. Okay, was outside the apartment building, which was right there on the street.
Yeah,
and we were going to shoot there later in the afternoon, and there was this little old lady down on the street with a suitcase at the bus stop, and he knew her because she had an apartment in the building, and he goes up to her. She's Jewish, and he goes up to her and he says, Mrs. Schwartz, where are you going? She looked down and she said, they're back. She had seen them, taken her family valuables, put them in the suitcase, and she was not waiting around. She was.
That's like a nightmare. That's a real like power of the movies or staging. That's pretty.
And also the depth of what happened, which I think the movie got to. I mean, really well, and it was sort of one of those ones where it's difficult all the way through, but in the end, it all kind of was blessed, I mean, and the subject matter, the story itself is so strong.
Yeah.
And it also, seen it recently, it's very, very relevant right now.
Yeah.
It's about collaboration. It's about giving into fascism. It's about how it happens gradually. It has a lot of parallels to what's going on in this country, and has gone on in cycles, obviously, throughout the world. But
has that movie or other movies, I know part of the ROLLERBOYS played last year, played in LA, like in the revival scene?
No, it hasn't. That's something I would like to get going. It showed in New York, and for a couple weeks in the theater recently.
Then I directed, I think, 12 features, and then also a ton of TV stuff. And, you're more like in the 2000s, you really kind of transitioned more to like documentary. Was that surprising that you had kind of started with, a real seminal documentary figure, and you kind of end up back there?
I think it's not surprising. I think that documentary and features and fiction they're both film, and they're both incredibly satisfying, and they're very different. And it was completely practical. I mean, what happened was I wasn't I had a family.
Yeah.
And I was going kind of cold in the feature film business. I was getting work, and I didn't really have the backup of doing TV. I mean, I was always sort of out there in whatever my own bizarro, world was. So I had a friend of mine that had been an intern when I was an editor in New York, and he'd been getting his PhD at NYU, and he called me and he said, and we became very good friends. And he called me, he said, I'm thinking of going into film. And I said, Jason, don't do it. It's a big mistake. I mean, it's like this is a bunch of snakes and biting each other in the back. And please don't do it. So, of course, he did go into the film, and he was actually in Hard Choices. He was an extra in Hard Choices. And so anyway, I was sort of going cold and looking around for what I was going to do. And we got in touch, and he wanted me to come back and do documentaries, because at that point, for two reasons. One, they were looking for storytellers. Documentaries tended to kind of just be these sort of recitations of facts.
Yeah.
And they didn't really tell a story. And so I'd written a lot of scripts, and he'd really liked, and wrote a script about the Civil War that he really loved. And also they were starting to integrate more cinematic techniques, doing recreations and stuff, which ranged from being really awful, like looking like something that was done on a high school stage with wooden spears, and the invasion of America. Three people get out of a rowboat, and so he was trying to develop that whole area and make that really work, and be hip, and I just got on a roll. I did a lot of movies stuff with him, and it was incredibly satisfying. I mean, as opposed to trying to develop a script, it was like they said, we want to make a movie about this culture in Peru. We want you to start in next month, and we want it delivered in 7 months. And it was the incredible variety of subjects that I took on, and most of which I would never have thought of doing. I mean, I was traveling all the time. I love to travel. With a feature film, it's like a huge collection of. It's very noble in a way, and to me, it's a bunch of people, really 50, 75 people, charging around the countryside trying to create a particular little world. You kind of go. Sometimes when you're making a film, say, is that our film? Is this the right place? Are we in the right? Is this right? And you're trying. Everybody sort of gets a sense of what the world is that you're creating. Documentaries are a tiny group, going out to explore try to discover the real world, and then as they changed, and there became more reenactments, then I got to do things like I did a film, 2-hour special on History Channel, for example, which was about Sherman's March, which is, 40 or 50% of it was Sherman. We had a Sherman, we had our Russian, we did the whole thing.
Yeah, well, you've covered like a crazy variety of different kinds of stories and everything. What is it like?
Throat sharp, wait to show
Yeah.
sponsor.
Well, what is it like now? Like 2026. Prayer of the Roller Boys, like it still has this audience, like people like your first movie is gonna get this release.
Yeah, and Fear of the Rollerboys just got picked up by Corbett. Yeah,
Okay.
And so
So it's gonna get like
it's going to get a little bit of whatever. It'll be like hopefully in repertory theaters. Yeah, be on cable and stuff like that. So yeah, they sort of you were at the Prayer of the Rollerboys screening, right? And that's typical of Prayer of the Rollerboys, even more typical, obviously, of Point Break. Yeah, I'm more peripherally involved with, but like people are really, if they're into it, they're really into it. At Prayer of the Rollerboys, this guy came up to me and said, I came from Ireland to the United States because of Prayer of the Roller, and I watch it twice every year.
Yeah.
And he's like in his 50s, 50s, and he they couldn't rent Prayer of the Rollerboys because they were 15 or 16.
Yeah.
And they would get their older brothers to rent it, and then they would, when their parents were out, they'd watch it, and make it because their parents would not have approved and stuff like that. So that kind of enthusiasm. It's like
the day of the rope is very important to that guy.
Right, exactly. Anyway, so but the idea that you can have that effect lingering, that just is really encouraging, and it's great.
Yeah. Well, I hope to see more of your movies getting that treatment. And Rick, thanks so much for taking the time to come on Movie Town and talk.
Oh, anytime. I loved it. It was great. Thanks a lot. Thank you. It's great. Super.